Give them a visual of what this journey looks like together and explain that it is a journey that you go on together.
This was a much needed wake-up call that you are a professional. You need to start acting like a professional. Welcome to the Growth Drivers Podcast, the show where we break down the leadership frameworks, mindset shifts, and strategies that fuel entrepreneurial success, personal transformation, and business breakthroughs.
I'm Rachael Novak.
And I'm Mike Novak.
Let's dive in and start driving your growth.
All right, the proven buyer system that is responsible for $400 million in sales. Wow, that's a lot of sales.
It's fun to go back 8+ years and see the impact that our team has actually had.
Yeah. And so we're going to do a real deep dive, very tactical podcast today about what is this system, right? And I put the $400 million on there because I want people to know that this isn't just some theory that we're sharing with people that we think could work. It's something that we actually developed 8 years ago, and we've tested hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times.
Literally.
Right?
Yes, exactly. I think that's we had this proven buyer system in place many, many years before the NAR ruling came down. And maybe we can kind of touch on that a little bit. But I think the frame of this, number one, is on the listing side, people have, a proven process, right? They have a system that they follow and process to get the paperwork and all that. Buyer side has been really loose for a really long time. Right. And so this is how you button up the proven buyer system in order to systematize the process for buyers, because it is possible. Yeah.
And so let's talk about systems. At Warrior Agent, this is a really huge part of what we do, giving coaching clients tactical step-by-step frameworks that you can implement into your business. Every person I talk to, every agent wants more systems and processes. And when I say that, I think that what they're actually after is consistency and predictability. You know what I mean? Exactly. They don't want to just guess on what to do or how to do it. They want to define it very clearly. And because of that, they expect some consistency to come out of that. Would you agree
they
with
want
that?
consistent results.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we have systems for everything. That's just the way that we have done things in our businesses and in our personal life. And so this is just one of those many systems that we have. It also sets super clear expectations when you've got clear systems and processes with both your clients and with your staff. Everyone knows what's going to happen, right? There's no surprises. And where there's no surprises, there's an insane amount of consistency and predictability that comes out of that.
Exactly right. I mean, as business owners, the more that we can set expectations, meet expectations, and for our teammates to also understand what their expectations are, the better everybody is going to do, right? Because in the world of real estate, especially, we are professional problem solvers. We are constantly solving problems. But if there is a framework and a structure that you have in each of these systems, in each of these processes, it's going to create that level playing field of expectation constantly. So you're not having to manage the ups and downs quite as much.
Right. So let's talk about the problem and the possibility here. The problem is really that buyer agents, have defaulted to really no process when it comes to working with buyers. What they've done for years, literally decades, is they just start showing people houses. Right.
Yes, on the good faith that they're going to work together.
Well, and there's no conversation hey, are you my agent?
Right.
You're not my agent. What are we doing here? There's really nothing that's been communicated or clarified. So zero expectations whatsoever occur by doing that, right? So like you said, you kind of hinted at this already, but when we got into real estate in 2017, we actually split up our business where you focused on listings, I focused on buyers. We both do both now, but then we decided to split it up to just really focus on doing one thing at a super high level. And like you said, on the listing side, most agents were very process driven. They would typically go out to a seller's home. They would go through the CMA, they'd go through their listing process, and then they would explain what it means to work together, and then they sign an agreement to actually represent that person.
Right.
Which made a ton of sense, right? But for some reason on the buy side, there was none of that happening, right? And our industry got called out on this shit last year, right?
Exactly.
This was a much needed wake-up call that, hey, you are a professional, you need to start acting like a professional.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. So while people were melting down around us because they had never really needed to implement a process or a hard conversation or establish agency, really, now being forced to, they weren't sure what to do. So we did a lot of trainings last year. We've done a lot of coaching on this. But that by far was the biggest problem with buyer's agents, is that there was like some assumption that they had made because they'd shown them a couple of houses, and then agents would be upset when the client went somewhere else to write an offer but there was no expectation set that they were the agent, right?
Yeah, there was never a conversation. Mm-hmm. So I loved every second of 2024. I thought it was a well-needed wake-up call to the industry.
Yeah.
And some people have adapted. I still see a lot of agents that don't follow the process and the law. Like, they're just breaking it, which is going to eventually catch up to them and is a super dangerous place to be. They're not signing buyer agency agreements, and more importantly, they're not setting expectations, Mm-hmm. So the buyer agency agreement is the thing that everyone's focused on, but that's really just the inevitable outcome of a lot of value that's been brought to that relationship.
Right. That's the formalization of, setting expectations with each other.
Right. So when we think about the problem and just go a little bit deeper in this, like we talked about, there's no expectations that have been set with the buyer when you just start randomly running around showing this person houses, right? Zero. Like, there's nothing. They don't know.
You probably haven't even explained what's happening.
They don't know what to expect with buying a house. They're just going to guess. And because of that, you're going to have lots of headaches and surprises and like 9 p.m. panic conversations with these person from start to end of the transaction, because you didn't tell them what's going to happen before it's going to occur.
Right. Exactly.
And I always try to bring perspective to this. Like, if you think about buying a house is, for virtually every single person that I've worked with, 99% of them, it's the single largest financial transaction of their life.
Correct.
Like, hands down. I mean, we're talking somewhere between $700,000 and $2 million that this person is going to spend. Mm-hmm. And they are guessing on how they're going to do this process and how they're going to go through it.
It's irresponsible.
Right?
It is.
But here's the thing is they don't know that, right? Mm-hmm. Because they assume, because no one's told them, that this is the process. If I want to buy a home, I just call an agent to go look at some houses.
Yeah.
Right? And then I buy one of those houses. Why is that not the process? And that's not their fault. That's our fault.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So that's the problem, just to frame it. On the possibility of things, so what is the process? Like, we start with meeting in office, right? Like, mm-hmm. I like to do Starbucks or an office. Either one's totally fine. I started at Starbucks before we had an office, and then did them all in office now. We don't call it a consultation to the client. Like, the term buyer consultation is a term that I use with other real estate agents.
Yes, in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and within our team, okay? So we start that in-person meeting. We don't call it a buyer consultation. Instead, we articulate in very clear detail what we're going to do, okay? And so there's 3 things that I like to get very clear on, and I would recommend writing these down. The first thing is review the home buying process from start to finish. I'm going to say it again. Review the home buying process from start to finish. Sounds really basic, but most people don't do this. The second thing we're going to do, we're going to get you up to speed in the market. Why do we do that?
Well, it's important that they understand what climate they're walking into. Can they be competitive? Do they need to be competitive? Do they need to make quick decisions? Do they have time to think about things? Like, they need to know the pace and the climate of the market, especially in the price range that they're shopping in.
Right. Housing markets are dynamic. Mm-hmm. The market today is going to be different than the market 4 weeks from now, mm-hmm. right? The market last year is different than the market is right now. And so you have to take the time to educate them on what's actually happening. Most people are going to watch CNN headlines and assume they know what's going on with the housing market locally. And we know that there's a big difference between panic headlines that get clicks and views and what's actually happening on the ground here in Snohomish County, mm-hmm. right? So talking about the market and updating them on what's happening and how that impacts them as a buyer is a really important part of the process.
Incredibly important.
And then identifying at a very granular level what we're looking for, right? So locations, must-haves, nice-to-haves. What the hell are we looking for, right? Instead of just running around saying, hey, I like that house. Why did you like that house?
Right.
What did you like about it? What in that home are things that you have to have, like non-negotiables?
Exactly. Well, I think like this is the part that, there's like this old adage in real estate where people say buyers are liars, right? And what they really mean is that buyers' tastes evolve based on the market climate, right? What's possible for them changes based on what they can afford, based on the location that they're happy with, based on all these different factors. And so agents who skip the part of being able to sit down with that person and identify what it is that they're looking for, why it is that they're looking for those particular traits or characteristics in a property are missing a huge opportunity. Because one of the things that you do really well, and we practice on our team, is when a buyer, say you're going through this process and you've shown this buyer 10, 15 properties, and they get to this kind of point where they all kind of blend in together and they're getting a little fatigued with looking at properties. And so some clients will tend to want to maybe settle on a property because it's like the best option right now. Well, our job isn't to let them settle into something that's not going to work for them. Our job is to remind them of the reasons why they're looking for this type of property, why they need these kind of things, and uphold them actually really loving the property that they're moving into for the season they're in. And I think that's a big miss for a lot of agents who don't sit down and get those facts from them.
Well, and so that conversation about what we're looking for is really a thought-provoking conversation for the client more so than it is for the agent.
Exactly.
Oftentimes when I have people come into my office for this, it's very often a couple and they haven't had this conversation. Right. And so I ask them, I say, what's important to you about the house you're going to buy? And they look at each other like the other person's going to answer this question because they haven't had the conversation. Right.
And it's fascinating to hear the difference.
We have to slow down and take the time to ask these questions. Like you said, buyers aren't liars. We just ask really shitty questions or we don't ask them at all. Right.
Yes.
So we have to get very clear on what are these must-haves, what are these non-negotiables, what are the things that would be nice to have but that are not deal breakers, and what is the location we're framing, right? Like how far north, how far south, how far east, how far west, and why.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
So we got to get very, very clear on that. Once we get clear on that, we can actually get a search set up, right? But it's an in-depth conversation. So that's how we frame what we're going to do when we're talking to this person on the phone. That's how we take someone who wants to go look at a home and we pivot it into one of these buyer consultations, okay?
Yes.
But before we meet, there's a really critical piece of the puzzle here that I like to explain. We're going to send 2 videos to this person. The first video is what we call the 4-phase approach to buying a house. So this is about a 3-minute long video where I explain each of these 4 phases. The first phase is planning and preparation. The second phase is the home touring phase. The third phase is the offering phase. And the fourth and final phase is contract to close. So very simple yet proven process, right? And I mentioned in this video, hey, we've done this 750 times or whatever it is at this point, right? So you're following a process that is proven, that's established, and that we know that works. And it's also very simple. Buying a house can be very complex, and our goal is to simplify that process as much as possible. So this video is very important.
Exactly.
The second video I like to send is why should you work with us? Like, what is our unique process? Like I just kind of briefly touched on. What's our track record and what's our social proof? So in this video, you should be explaining what you do with buyers that most agents don't do. Like on our team, we have showing partners. So clients are able to see homes 7 days a week. We have our own mobile app. Like we do a lot of different things that other agents in our market don't do, or that very few of them do. But you have to get very clear on that. Like why are you different? And if you don't know why you're different, you need to do some deep thinking on what you're going to do that's going to be different, okay?
Maybe so implement some processes.
This is really, really important shit, and people just like bypass all of this. And then the best part of that video is put up kind of a highlight reel of screenshots from your Zillow reviews or Google reviews. Like just show them like 10 or 15 of these in a row. 5 stars, 5 stars. Mike was awesome. Rachel was great. Like they navigated the whole process. Like show that you have been very successful.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
This isn't my first transaction. So why is this effective? Why do we send these 2 videos? Well, we do it to build trust and authority before we even meet this person, okay? I would say something like 95% of the people I meet watch these videos before they come in. If you don't make it easy for them to research you, they're going to do it on their own.
Right.
They're going to go Google your name. And they might find something great. They might find your political rant on Facebook and be totally turned off by you. Or you can make it really easy on them and tell them what they should be watching and who you are before they even come. Just send it to them, right?
Give them plenty of material to digest that you have the control over what they're watching, essentially.
Right. When they show up to the meeting, this person shows up very different than someone that didn't watch these videos.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
This person wants to work with you, and they almost feel like they're in the room with a celebrity. They're like, I saw you on YouTube, right? And then I watched 10 more of your videos. Awesome. Cool. Now we're in rapport.
Well, and like slow down a little bit when it comes to like the 4 phases video, because this is number one, if you don't have a roadmap in your buyer guide, explaining each of these phases, that needs to be like number one change that you do. Like you can talk about process and all this, but give them a visual of what this journey looks like together and explain that it is a journey that you go on together through these different phases. And the reason we break that down in the video prior to is when you get into the actual conversation, like you mentioned, you framed it so well that now instead of explaining and it being new information that they're digesting, they've already digested this information and now we're just confirming the details. So it makes for an incredibly efficient time with the clients when you've created these videos. It takes a little bit of work, but once it's done, it's done. Repurpose the video for years. It's evergreen.
Right. And in our coaching, not to plug it again, but we do have like a step-by-step process for this, including our videos, and we show you how to automate it through Calendly. So when you schedule an appointment, these videos go out automatically. It's pretty slick. So let's talk about the meeting. Like I said earlier, office or Starbucks. Starbucks is cool if you're trying to do home tours at the end of the buyer consultation, which it makes total sense. Like people want to go see a couple homes. You want to ride that motivation. You can reduce friction from having them come to the office and instead just choosing a Starbucks that's nearby the homes that they want to go see. When I don't do a lot of Starbucks consultations anymore because I don't have the time to run around. They have to come to me at this point. But when I started, I would do this all the time. And I had the best Starbucks picked out in each city that was quiet, that actually had seating, and that wasn't jamming busy. Because some Starbucks are great to meet at and others are absolutely horrible. Right. So I had mapped those all out. And again, I had them in Calendly. I just picked the right one for the city and we were off to the races. I would go do the consultation, sign them, and then go show them the houses. Right. You also have enormous leverage to get them to sign because they're not looking at the houses unless they sign.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
So
which is like...
makes a lot of sense.
You're in compliance now, people.
Yeah. On the other side of that, meeting at the office can make sense if you're a busier agent. Like if you're already selling a lot of houses, like 40, 60, 70 homes a year, you probably don't have the time to go run around to Starbucks. People are going to have to come to you. I've done as many as 5 buyer consultations in one day. You can be super efficient and just stack the deck. I like to create 1-hour windows. It's about 40 minutes for the consultation, and then it's about 20 minutes to grab some water, go to the bathroom, put some notes in the CRM, come back and knock it out again. So either one of those works though. So what's the anatomy of this meeting once we actually meet with them? Let me break down kind of like the timeline of how this should go. The first 10 minutes is really connection, rapport building. I like to reaffirm everything they told me on the phone.
Yes.
Right. I'll go
revisit
reread the notes before the consultation to make sure they know that I was listening, or if somebody else set the appointment, that there was a seamless transfer of information from whoever set the appointment to me. Exactly. Right. Hey, Destiny told me that it's really important to you that you have at least 3 bedrooms and a 1-story home. Let's talk more about that. Right. So they're not having to repeat themselves, but I'm asking a lot more clarifying questions than what they already told me. Okay.
Going deeper.
Yep. Going a lot deeper. So that first 10 minutes is really important to do that. I don't recommend just like pulling out your buyer's guide and jumping into it. It's going to feel like very salesy. There's a time and place to pull out the buyer's guide, but you need to build that rapport and that connection before you even do that.
Yeah. I mean, like at the end of the day, all of this only works if the clients actually trust you and feel like you care about them in this process. So that first 10 minutes of the buyer consultation is where you convey the care that you have for the process, the care that you have for them personally, and showing the interest in the why behind the motivation. So that's an incredibly important part of that rapport building, that connection, and then reiterating details and possibly helping them get clarity, especially on those spousal relationships that haven't really discussed the must-haves. When his must-haves are different than her must-haves or whatever, it's a really good kind of clarifying time for everybody.
Yeah. So then the next 25 minutes is really going through the home buying process like we had talked about. And this is the time to pull out the buyer's guide. You kind of hinted on it already, but the roadmap page, which breaks down the 4 phases of buying a home in granular detail, it's got like 5 or 6 bullet points for each phase. That's where we're going to spend most of this 25 minutes. Like you could probably spend 2/3 to 3/4 of that time on this one page if you're really explaining it very clearly to people. Okay. So roadmap page, very, very important, kind of the meat and the potatoes of the buyer consultation. Do not rush through this. Take your time to explain everything. It's really tempting sometimes to just like brush over things and go quicker just because you want to sign them, move on to the next person or the next thing that you need to go do. But when you do that, it just sets you up to have a really frustrating experience later. And it also sets them up to fail too, because you're not going to have set clear expectations. So slow down enough to really explain it.
Well, it's like it's like what we've learned is in the beginning, you kind of have to slow down in order to speed up. Like the more you can slow down in the beginning, set the expectations, answer the questions, fill them in on the process. Then when you're actually in the thick of the journey, when you're in the thick of all of these details, now you just have to revisit the details you've already explained, and it will trigger those memories for them. So they go, oh yeah, that's right. Like I remember we talked about that in the consultation.
Yeah. So we do that. Then we briefly touch about agency as well. We explain the difference between a buyer agent and a listing agent. Again, really important for transparency. Okay. What does a buyer agent do? What does a listing agent do? And why should they not be the same person?
Correct. Yeah. Why they shouldn't go directly to the listing agent. Why it's not going to save them money to go directly to the listing agent.
Yeah. And I know this is going to piss off some agents that like to do dual agency and represent both parties, but let's be super honest. The only person that wins when that happens is you, the agent. It's not either one of the clients. So just going to call that out. Closing costs. I like to explain, what does the seller pay? What does the buyer pay? If you don't break this down for people, you're going to get massive confusion when it comes time to actually offer on a house. They're going to say things like, I want the seller to pay the closing costs, but they have no clue what that means, right? Like, well, do you mean the commissions? Because they're already paying that in most cases. Do you mean the excise tax? Do you mean your loan fees? Like, what are you talking about?
Yes,
so we have to explain this, right? We have to break it down. We have to frame, what is the buyer paying for? What is the seller paying for? And how much to budget for your closing costs?
There seems to be, at least in like a lot of the consultations that I have done, buyers are very surprised to learn that the seller is already paying like 8-9% of the purchase price and closing costs, and the buyer's closing costs are actually only 1.5% to 2%. A lot of them kind of look at me like, oh, like I didn't realize they pay that much, right? So it's that, again, why it's so important to explain that and be very transparent about how those closing costs work.
And they also don't understand that most of their closing costs are actually their own lender's fees.
Right. Yeah, they don't really have hardly any other costs. Yeah.
But you'll hear them say weird shit like that all the time, like the seller's going to pay the closing costs. Well, what does that mean? Okay. So offer variables is another page to go over. The offer variables, like what's going to make your offer come across as strong or weak in the eyes of a seller. I do like to cover this page, especially with people that are like reasonably financially savvy are going to follow along, because if you don't, then they're going to really have no idea or context on what would take to get an offer accepted, okay? Especially in a competitive market. The more competitive the market gets, the more important that page becomes. And then the last page is just what I call the next steps page. It basically just sets you up to sign the person, okay?
Yeah, I mean, and talk a little bit about that, because you do a phenomenal job of framing from the beginning, right? Like in the very first part of this 25 minutes where you're going over the roadmap page, what do we put as like the number one thing in phase one to tee you up to sign this person at the end of this meeting?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of phase one in our roadmap page, it says you're going to sign a buyer agency agreement. So we set the expectation within the first 10 minutes of the meeting or so, and we're not surprising them at the end.
Exactly.
Right? And so this is really important. And what else is important is before you move from phase one to phase two in the roadmap page, if you see our buyer's guide, this is going to make more sense to you. Ask them if they have any questions. And what I'm really inviting you to do is object.
Yes.
Right? Because if you've got a problem with signing, I want to cover it right here, right now.
Yeah, I don't want to go through another half an hour. Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you the easiest way to take down the pressure on signing, and you may not want to do this as an agent, but this is my policy, is I just simply tell people, this is a cancelable agreement. If at any point I feel like we're not a good fit to work together, I would say me first, or you don't feel that way, we can simply rip this up and you can go find another agent to help you. I'm not going to go sue somebody to represent them as a buyer. That's ridiculous, right?
Exactly.
This is just a progression of trust. The first progression of trust was to come meet with me. The second progression of trust is to sign an agreement that I'm going to be a real estate agent. The third progression of trust is to actually help you buy a house.
Exactly.
Right?
But how you frame that as well is so key, right? Not saying, hey, if at any time you don't think that I'm good or whatever, like we can rip this up. No. It is, if at any point I feel like we're not a fit, or you may not agree that we're a fit, then we'll rip this up. It's framing that you also have control as the agent to fire those clients if necessary,
right?
Without saying those words.
Absolutely done.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
So it's a two-way street. And then the last 5 minutes is closing and signing the person. The easiest close ever. Get a pen ready. This is going to be a jaw dropper. Would you like me to be your real estate agent to help you find a home? Everyone puts so much pressure, but just ask that question.
That's it, guys.
Would you like me to be your real estate agent and help you find a home?
Guess what people say 9 times out of 10 or more?
Like 9.9 out of 10.
They go,
well, of course.
Yes, of course.
That's why we're here, right? Well, yeah. Okay, sign, right? So take down like the pressure on yourself from like developing the perfect like zinger close. Like a lot of coaches, like I'm just gonna call it Tom Ferry right now, who's never sold a house. Like they try to give you these verbatim scripts that you should memorize and commit to memory so that when you go into a listing appointment, when you go into a buyer consultation, you can say these things robotically. Like I've actually heard them like really be proud of the fact that they can recite their listing presentation or their buyer consultation off the top of their head.
Yeah. Like that's
not a robot.
That's not a conversation with a human.
No, that's talking at somebody.
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that's not a good close, in my opinion. Again, look at people that have actually sold houses, right? So anyways, enough about that. So you've signed them at that point. Now they're a client. You're going to help them find the house. The last thing I want to touch on, and we'll just go quickly through this because we're going long here, is the showing partner model. We absolutely believe in the showing partner model. It's something we coach other people to do that we've used for years. Showing partner model is really basically where you have a full-time W-2 employee who is your partner that's going to go show houses for you. They're going to be leverage for you. They're going to respond in the CRM as you. They're going to set appointments. They're going to set up home tours. They're going to sit inspections. They're going to do key handoffs. They're going to do final walkthroughs. I mean, they do all of the time-consuming activities, right? It's kind of like that doctor-nurse relationship. You're the doctor, you're coming in to do the surgery. That involves typically setting the appointment, right? It involves doing this consultation to set expectations and sign the person. And that involves coming back in and actually negotiating the deal. You have to step back in to negotiate the deal.
Exactly.
Do not hand it off to your partner.
Exactly.
Very important. That's what the person is paying you for.
You have to negotiate the deal. You have to negotiate the inspection if there's a lot of things. You have to negotiate the appraisal if there are issues. Like you have to step in at the key moments to make sure and solidify the contract. But the showing partner, like you said, is kind of the nurse, right? They get to take care of the person and make them feel warm and fuzzy pretty consistently and follow up weekly, sending them homes and that kind of thing. So very important dynamic.
Yeah, most buyers take 8 to 12 hours to look at homes. That's just a very time-consuming part of the process. It's hard to scale your buyer business unless you get a showing partner. So if you're trending like 25, 30 deals a year, and a fair amount of that is buyer business, it's a really great hire to add. We always recommend adding the showing partner after you have an assistant. So be assistant first, showing partner second. That partner should be in your consultations with you so the client gets to meet them face to face. And then that handing of the baton goes from you to them once they're signed, right? Now that partner is going to set up their search the rest of the way. They're going to push through all the paperwork. They're going to start a group text thread with that person and with you on there as well. They're going to send them homes each week. They're going to call them each week. Of course, they're going to go show them houses, and they're going to pull you back in when it's time to actually offer on the house. Okay?
Super important part of this too. When you're setting the expectation, when you are in the initial meeting with the clients and you're talking, if say the partner isn't there, right? Say the partner's out showing other houses during this time, that you're explaining your relationship with your showing partner as business partners. You're not saying my assistant. You're not saying my showing assistant, because the perception of the public or perception of people when they hear assistant versus business partner is very different. And you want to empower your showing partner. You want to empower your production partner to be shoulder to shoulder with you, a partner in this process with the clients. And the clients and the partner will both thrive much, much more if you set those expectations that you are equals on equal playing field. You just have different jobs in the process.
Yeah, never call them your assistant. Absolutely. They're going to feel handed off. And there's probably going to be some agents out there that have limiting beliefs about a showing partner. They think that they have to be the one to show the house, that they show homes just so good. And I am a control freak. There is zero question about that. I had to get past this myself. And once I saw it work literally hundreds of times, I just finally was convinced, like, this is the way to do it. The client actually prefers this.
Yes.
And the reason they prefer this is because they know that you're busy. They don't want to bug you nonstop, but they're happy to bug your partner nonstop, right?
Well, and listen, like most, like, especially if you're listening to this, if you're implementing anything, if you're in the warrior agent movement or programs, then you are a high achiever, right? You're somebody who's probably very driven. You're probably somebody who's relatively impatient, very, very busy. Those are not bad traits. Those are good things. And the beauty of having a showing partner is that person can slow down with the clients. They can talk and dream in every single home. They can spend a little bit more time. Whereas Mike Novak showing a house is like, all right, there's a bathroom, there's a kitchen. This isn't going to work because of this. So let's go. And the person's like, well, wait, like I want to look.
If you hire the right partner, I mean, they will have a very different personality than a top producing aggressive agent. Like if you're familiar with disc personalities, like most top agents are DIs or IDs or DCs, and most showing partners are ISs or SIs.
Yes.
So they're
perfect.
Yeah, it's just a really good partnership and match. And the other thing that it obviously provides the ability for the client to see homes 7 days a week because there's 2 of you, which is really what every buyer wants.
Yeah. And you want to make sure, I mean, obviously this isn't necessarily in regards to the buyer consultation, but setting up your schedule, like your recurring weekly schedule opposite each other is super important. So have opposite days out of the office. Make sure that you have coverage on the weekends if you're not wanting to work Saturdays or Sundays, or alternate with your partner. Like make it so that they have a day off during the week so that, they've got time to do stuff, but then they're covering you in the times that you want to be off as well.
Right. So if you're interested in learning more about this, you can definitely check out our coaching programs. We'll put a link down below on both YouTube and our podcast, so you can check those out. We have a couple different programs. Some of them are as low as $397 a month to give you access to all these systems and processes, all designed to work less and sell more.
That's right. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap on today's episode of Growth Drivers.
If you found value in this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with a fellow entrepreneur.
For more insights, tools, and resources, visit us at thewarrioragent.com.
Keep pushing forward, keep leading with purpose, and we'll see you next time.